I published this over at wisdomschool.com, although it could have gone on Hartmann Report just as easily, because it has some connection to politics, I suppose. This was a piece written by University of Leeds researcher Derek Mitchell, this paragraph. It was for a publication called The Conversation. And he's a researcher into bees, honeybees. And he writes, swarming honeybees send out scouts to find suitable nests, measure them for fitness, that's the nest, again, or potential nest, against a list of criteria such as height off the ground, volume, entrance size, and entrance location. They communicate this information to the rest of the scouts. Then the scouts engage in a voting system to select the best one and move the entire swarm, sometimes over a kilometer, to the new nest. Democracy. Honeybees engaging in democracy. And he goes on to talk about how this is clearly a survival system that nature evolved, democracy. That animals that engage in democratic behavior have higher survival potential than those who don't. And by the way, that would include humans. Democracy doesn't necessarily rule out leadership or even hierarchies of wealth or power, but what it does do is it specifies that wealth and power that determines, or the power anyway, that determines how hierarchies are formed, maintained, and determined, who's in charge, in other words, comes from what Thomas Jefferson called the consent of the governed. And, you've heard me talk about this before. Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence said, nature's God. He referred to nature's God. John Adams scratched it out and wrote in the Christian God, and Jefferson scratched it out and put nature's God back in there. And, that was what he was talking about, was that he saw democracy all around him in nature. And now, good, solid research has proven this. You've heard the story of the red deer. I've been talking about it for 10 years since I first learned about it. This university, I believe it's Sussex or Essex, in the UK, where they were monitoring herds of red deer, and the deer were voting by the position of their bodies on which water hole to go to and when to go. And whenever the vote hit 51%, they would go, unless there was a predator in the area, in which case they had to hit a 2/3 majority. They had to have 67% before they would all go voting in favor of something. And the founders put that into our Constitution, that, to do normal stuff, majority vote. That's how the House and Senate work. But major stuff, structural stuff, stuff that will change America in big ways, like amendments to the Constitution, that requires a 2/3 vote. Just like with the red deer, just like with coyotes, just like with, you pick your species. There are very, very few solitary species, virtually all species, from insects to mammals. Most of your solitary species are cold-blooded species. But beyond that, you find community basically everywhere, and democracy. How is it that a school of fish seems to be, telepathically, they're all swimming along in one direction, and then boom, suddenly they just make a 20-degree turn to the right and they all go off in another direction. Or a flock of birds, they're flying along and then suddenly they all move. Well, it turns out that every fish with every motion is moving, is voting. And if more than 50% of them move, 2 degrees to the right as they're swimming, then suddenly the entire school of fish does that. Same thing with birds that are flocking. They're flying along, and if more than 50% of them move 5 degrees to the left or 20 degrees to the right, the whole flock will follow. If it's less than 50%, the whole flock ignores it, and they just get back in line. This is democracy. Democracy is what works. And that should really highlight for all of us the danger that the MAGA GOP now represents in their efforts to thwart democracy, to buy elections, to carpet bomb Americans with disinformation and lies, and to even blow up elections with this new strategy of refusing to certify them. They don't believe in democracy, but democracy is the greatest survival skill for humans and for human societies. And we need to say it loud. You can read all about it over at wisdomschool.com. I'll be back with your calls on the other side of the break. Stay with us.